Welcome, everyone, to the Vision Straight Masterclass Series. I'm Obi Malope, an optometrist and eye care leader based in the motherland, South Africa. And today, I'm out in the United States with my good old friend, one of the most inspiring eye care leaders that you'll ever meet, that you'll ever come across, and that is none other than Dr. Fayiz Mahgoub. How are you today, Doc?
I'm well, Obi. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. You know, I've been following your work over the last few years, and my, oh my, the approach to eye care, the approach to making a difference, the approach to transforming how we as eye care professionals or businesses redefine what eye care is all about. You epitomize that like no other person. And so you are so much into technology, you are so much into entrepreneurial work. And it's such an honor and a privilege to actually have this masterclass series with you, because I've been learning so much from you. And I believe that the audience that is going to join us is also going to be inspired by the type of leader that you are. And just before we get started, I want to actually read a short intro about the type of person that you are. Dr. Mahgoub is an optometrist with a passion for technology and eye care. He is the founder of Augmented Vision Labs, which is an eye care technology company focused on applying emerging technologies to the delivery of eye care. He is a strong believer in the power of technology to revolutionize patient care and is dedicated to helping accelerate that process. Welcome to the platform, Dr. Mahgoub.
Great to be with you, Obi. Thanks very much for having me, and thanks for the intro.
No, absolutely, absolutely. How did your journey into eye care start?
It was actually not something that I envisioned myself coming into. I actually was interested in healthcare, but didn't quite understand what optometry was or what the options were in the healthcare field. So it's thanks to the advisor at my undergrad, Colorado State University, who happened to actually be the advisor for the pre-optometry club. So when she saw that I had an interest in science, she recommended that I consider looking into optometry. And I was very fortunate to have a community of optometrists here in my hometown, Fort Collins, Colorado, who really took us under their wing and introduced us to the profession and invited us to come to their practices and see what optometry was all about. And it was through those experiences that I really discovered that optometry was something that would be a great career for me to pursue.
Wow. You've got a very interesting name and surname. Are you from America? I've always been fascinated by your name, because I've never met anyone with your name and surname from America.
Yeah, so my name is Arabic. I was actually born in Libya, but my family is originally from Sudan. And I actually grew up in Sudan. And when I was 10 years old is when my family relocated here to the States.
Wow, wow, wow. I'm sure a lot of people did not know that about you. Wow, that's very, very interesting. You mentioned the exposure you got to various leaders and eye care professionals who gave you the opportunity for you to sort of like be exposed to optometry very early on, where your interest developed for the industry. So I wanted to find out from you, your interest specifically to technology. How did that come about?
You know, that wasn't something that I necessarily knew on the forefront of my mind. But when I was a kid, I used to always love tinkering with gadgets and technology. I used to love taking toys apart and hacking things together and making new toys from old toys that were broken. So that has been kind of something on the back of my mind, but I didn't really understand it up until later after I graduated from optometry school that that's probably one of the things that actually helped gravitate me to the field of optometry. I do recall seeing that at optometrist offices, we had so many different tools that were being used to actually help patients where, in the primary care office, mostly you're seeing a doctor just using a stethoscope or some, very kind of rudimentary technology on the front end. I know on the back end, they have a lot of sophisticated, diagnostics as far as lab work and things like that. But as far as, what you're using as a clinician, I saw that optometrists really had their finger on the pulse of the latest and greatest. That was something that drew me to optometry.
Wow, wow, wow. And is that what led to your interest in starting Augmented Vision Labs? Or had you been spending some time working as an optometrist where you found that you cannot withhold this vision any longer? It's time for you to go out there and work on it and making sure that it comes to fruition. How did that process evolve? Is it something that you identified that you want to go in that route while you were studying optometry school? Or was it only once you qualified where that process of accelerating your journey in starting your own business, becoming an entrepreneur came about?
That's a great question. So it actually did start during optometry school. So I ran into issues that I felt like optometry could be solved, could be helped with technology. So when I was a student, I actually had a mentor who was one of my professors in optometry school, Dr. Manish Sharma, who really encouraged me when I had an idea to put together an app to help students transitioning from the classroom to the clinic, and pretty much putting together a lot of the information that we're either expected to memorize or have on hand. And so he helped me learn about web design, and also helped expose me to entrepreneurship workshops that were available in the area. And so from that point on, I saw that, I really do enjoy the experience of looking at problems and trying to apply technology to help solve them. So that stuck with me. And then later on in my optometry career, I went through my rotations during my fourth year, and then I saw, more issues that I felt like technology could help solve. And I think at that point is really where I saw myself being the person that would help kind of bring these technologies to patients.
What are some of those issues that you actually had identified that led to you then looking at where the niche is so that you can then customize your approach to solve that particular niche within that problem that you had identified?
And so one of the things that I actually learned through the different entrepreneurship workshops that I participated in was that the most important part of innovating something is actually finding a problem that's a true pain point for the person who would be the end user. And so when I was a fourth year intern at University Hospitals in Cleveland, I actually discovered that the contact lens patients that we were helping fit in scleral lenses had a really difficult time inserting the lenses. And for some patients, it would take maybe one or two coaching lessons. But for other patients, even after hours of coaching, they were still struggling. And I did more research on the issue and found that about 1/3 of patients who are in scleral lenses end up dropping out. And the biggest reason for that was the issue with actually getting the lenses inserted. So about 1/3 of the patients that drop out due to insertion issues. So that averages to about 1 in 10 people who need scleral or hybrid lenses end up dropping out just because of how difficult it is to insert the lenses. And then the people that don't drop out, there's a segment of those people who spend an hour or more every morning just to insert their lenses. So, I saw that this was a real burden on those patients, and it motivated me to think of, are there options out there that can help solve that problem?
Wow, wow, that is absolutely phenomenal. Now, that process then, whereby you went about then uh, implementing the process that's involved in creating this technology, what are some of the challenges that you encountered in developing the technology? And the second part of the question would be the fear that people that are more experienced, more exposed, more financially resourced, who have better infrastructure, better systems than perhaps you had at the time. Weren't you afraid of people then taking your idea and running on it by themselves? What are some of those challenges and dynamics that were at play when you were then in action mode, getting the technology into the market, establishing it? Can you give us a breakdown of that process that was involved in you getting your product into the market?
Absolutely. So one of the most daunting things in the beginning was that I didn't have any formal training or any experience in product design or developing a physical product. So, that process entailed, spending a lot of hours online, learning about the different ways that you can actually manufacture or prototype something. And that's when I discovered 3D printing. And I, took how to do computer assisted design and then also 3D printing. And from there, I was able to put together a prototype. And I was fortunate to have colleagues who were willing to have me send out some of the prototypes so they can try them out with patients, and gave me really valuable feedback. And so it took more time kind of refining that process. Then I also needed to take some time to learn about intellectual property and see if this is something that I actually did want to bring to market. How would I go about getting intellectual property protection so that the things that I do actually invent that are new are things that I can actually get credit for and not have it be something like you mentioned that someone else just comes along and produces it without my consent.
Wow, wow. For any entrepreneur, circumstances are never favorable, resources are never enough, support is never adequate. When you look back at the start of your journey in not only creating the innovation or the technology, but also setting up your business, which part was easier, the setting up of the company or the setting up of the technology?
It's a really good question. So, each one is difficult in its own way, I would say. Uh, I feel like a business is a little bit more challenging at times because there are so many different moving pieces. But a lot of it has to do with just kind of that initial phase because a lot of things that you're doing, business-wise, require a lot of kind of upfront work, and then the maintenance is a little bit easier, kind of on the back end. So I would say that that they're both challenging, kind of in their own ways. Uh, but one thing that I think I kind of realized, more than once, is that sometimes my imagination makes things bigger and scarier than they really are. And after even doing just a little bit of research and a little bit of education, my anxiety level typically goes down quite a bit because sometimes I, over overestimate things as far as their difficulty level.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I love that. Did you go about it all by yourself, outside of the colleagues and the network that you had in terms of helping you uh, get the prototype in patients' hands? What are some of the things that you did in establishing a team, that team that helps you make things work, make things happen? Or were you still alone, right, in the early stages for a very long time? Because I know in my own business, for example, I worked by myself with my wife for like the first few years. And eventually I realized that in order for the business to get to a certain level, we need other people on board, and you needed a buy-in, you needed a different set of skills that can come and accelerate your business to another level. So years later now, with your setup, moving beyond just the mentors and your colleagues, have you managed to bring people on board with different set skills that can help your business, innovative ideas grow faster than what you would normally do on your own?
Yes, and I think that's really one of the most important things for any entrepreneur is to understand, what point is the right point to bring in people who can take things that you're doing yourself, so you can free yourself up to do more. And so for me, it was about a 3-year process of working kind of me as the main person, and like you had mentioned, really reaching for colleagues and helping kind of leverage their help as far as the things that I couldn't get. I could only get so many patient interactions and so much feedback by myself, but leveraging that network of colleagues was a really important thing. But then it came to the point where the manufacturing capacity needed to go beyond what I could manufacture myself, because in the beginning I was manufacturing all of the devices myself. And so at that point, I enlisted the help of my younger brother, Fayiz Mahgoub, and he's been really instrumental helping scale the production of the devices that we offer to patients. And that has been important, freeing me up to go back to the research and development and helping innovate new ideas for the company to grow further.
The aspect of finances, because to start anything, sometimes resources are required, let alone to go the innovation or technological route. The starting up capital, how did you raise that? Were you still working as an optometrist? Are you still working as an optometrist? How did you get up that initial capital that was required in developing the technology?
That's definitely one of the toughest things that I think any entrepreneur kind of has to decide, whether you're interested in taking on capital and bringing in partners, or are you interested in self-funding a company and bootstrapping it? Obviously, it's a little more difficult when you have all the financial burden on yourself. But the plus side of that is that you actually are forced to learn more skills that you would otherwise outsource. So for me, understanding that I was new to the entrepreneurship space, I really wanted to learn as much as possible. So I saw benefits in actually, being a person that has to learn all the skills that are needed to get the business off the ground. And then that way, when I brought people in, I had the confidence that I could help teach them any things that, that maybe they needed help with, because I understood that in the beginning, it's difficult for a company to be able to bring on subject matter experts who are at the top of their field and all the different things that a business needs. So I saw myself needing to probably teach people who were just kind of beginning in whatever position I brought them in for. So that ended up being actually the route that I decided to go with, by self-funding the company through just savings and starting slow, and then using the revenue from the business to grow the business over time. So the trade-off there would be that the business grows more slowly, but I felt that that wasn't as much of a limitation because I needed that time to learn how to be someone who can actually run the business as well.
Wow, I love that because a lot of the times as entrepreneurs, we want sort of like get rich quick schemes. You've got this amazing idea and you want the fruits of that hard work to come now, but you seem to have had that long-term vision in terms of not only how is the technology going to impact people's life, how the optometry community or eye care community is going to be receptive towards the technology and how they're going to embrace it, but also you in it for the long haul. And I think that's something very, very inspiring for new entrepreneurs who have various sorts of ideas wanting to bring them into the market, that you need to actually put yourself in a situation where you learn all the different dynamics involved in the process of not only getting your business to the level at which it's supposed to be, but also getting your product to the level it's supposed to be. When you look at the multiple facets involved in running the type of business that you are running, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be supply chain management, whether it be customer support, the constant education that you need to be doing, the knowledge that you need to be expanding and leveraging off, the social media aspects, the business development, as well as the research. When you look at all these facets, which ones have been the most difficult for you to navigate through?
Yeah, as I think about it, I think that actually the most challenging part is really understanding how to prioritize those different things, right? And so it's not necessarily even just executing on each of those verticals, which they're all important, right? Supply chain is important to be able to manufacture something, and then social media and advertising is important to get people to understand that the thing that you manufactured actually exists. So, they're all very important. The challenge that I think, can be the toughest thing to pin down is how much time to spend on each at what point and how to switch back and forth between them. It's really a juggling act. And I feel like it's difficult when you're one person trying to do a lot of those tasks yourself to really understand how much time to spend on which task at what time and when to back off and invest your resources in another area. So that's something that I've been getting better at, still not perfect at it, but I think it's probably the most important thing.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And what are some of them? What are some of the things that you have had to sort of like do then in understanding that process for yourself? Because you did not have a business background. You've had to sort of like learn, adapt, educate yourself on the job while everything else is still happening. So what are some of the practical things that you would say you have had to develop or do throughout the process? Because this is a master class at the end of the day. So there's going to be someone who's sitting in a different country who's got an idea, thinking to themselves, I've got this brilliant idea that I want to bring to the market. And there's so many aspects involved. I still have a 9-to-5 job. You mentioned the balancing act. Do you still work as an optometrist, or are you doing this on a full-time basis? So what are some of the practical day-to-day stuff that you have had to develop over time that enable you to navigate all these different dynamics then?
Absolutely. And I think there's a second balancing act when it comes to how you're spreading your time between the business and what else you're doing outside of the business. So for me, that was making time for either patient care or consulting, public speaking, the business, and the timeshare between those things has changed, through time, depending on what the business needed. And so that's one of the things I think any clinician entrepreneur has to, understand that it's something that there's not going to be necessarily a clear-cut answer of how much time to invest in what, and what really is going to be your kind of overall balance at the end of it. I think it's nice to understand kind of a vision of what you would ideally like to spend your time doing, and also understand what your long-term vision for the business is. So, for me, I really didn't want to take time from the business that would actually hinder the growth. So for me, right now I spend the vast majority of my time on Augmented Vision Labs. So in the future, that may change. And as I bring people on board that can take up some of the work that I'm doing myself now, those opportunities will definitely open themselves up. But that is an important thing that any entrepreneur who's also, working on being a clinician or doing other things in the eye care space has to get a feel for. And it's kind of a personal decision.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Some of the challenges that we all tend to experience is that we have an initial great start where the industry receives our products, our ideas very well. Then we tend to have that bit of a plateau where we don't scale as quickly as we would love to, whether it be in our own countries or outside of our countries that we are operating in. How has your journey with regards scaling the business been for you? And have there been any aspects of frustration that have been attached to that process for you personally, where you feel like the product is not getting to as many practices as you would love them to be in, or the industry is not receiving the product as fast as you would like to receive it, or the product is not getting out of America as quickly as you would love for it to get out? What are some of the aspects or dynamics involved with regards scalability from your side?
Yes, so all those different things that you mentioned have been frustrations that I personally have experienced. I think that one kind of mistake that I made early on is thinking that a company could grow at the speed of thought, right? Like if I thought of something, I thought, this should work, then it just will, right? And that was a really nice way to think, because thinking of an idea is only a small part. It's often the easiest part. The most difficult part I found is usually executing and following up on that idea and discovering all the things that you estimated would go one way, but actually don't, right? So I think having more patience is always a helpful thing. And looking back on things, I think there's actually a blessing in disguise that things did not grow as quickly as I originally kind of would have hoped for, because I realized that there were things that needed to be refined, whether it's with actual products or with the business and how it's structured. And one thing that I think is really helpful to think about is, once you scale, any problems that you have are going to be problems at scale, right? So you're better off really refining things, making sure that you solve as many obvious problems as you possibly can, because then when you scale, you have less issues that scaled with you, right? And then you can benefit from kind of having a smoother ride at that larger stage.
Wow, I love that. I love that. That's so true. And I think a lot of people that are going to be watching this, they can learn so much from what you've just shared with us. Um, have you received any testimonies from the patient side of things? Because I know when I started with scleral lenses, for example, um, the biggest challenge was exactly what you highlighted was a problem. And I'm in South Africa, where the patient fallout or dropout was as a result of the insertion and usage of scleral lenses, getting them in the eye. That process itself was very, very difficult. And of course, your technology was not in the market at that time, which would have been an amazing part. But have you received any testimonies, and how has that made you feel, receiving some of those testimonies from patients, not necessarily the optometrist, but from the patients themselves?
Yeah, I think that that's been the most rewarding part of this for me. And even earlier on in the process, where the business really was not at the scale that I was hoping for it to be, and when things got challenging and frustrating, having patients reach out and share their experience with the device and how much it has helped them, that really would always make my day, and it helped me really realize that I was working towards something that was bigger than myself. So
Wow.
being able to help those patients and serve those patients is really an honor and a pleasure. And I think that having something that you can consciously and obviously see an impact in people's lives is one of the biggest motivators for anyone who is looking to start a venture, because it helps keep you going.
I love that. You mentioned that you're doing something that's bigger than yourself. What would you like to see happening from both the side of Augmented Vision Labs as a company and from the side of the product that you've already put into the market? What is it that you would actually want to see happening with both of the aspects of the product or the company?
Absolutely. So in terms of the product, I would love to see the product be as accessible to all patients as possible who could benefit from it. And it's my job to help kind of address all the different boundaries that could prevent people from being able to benefit from the technology. And from the company perspective, I really would love to see Augmented Vision Labs make an impact on eye care that is positive, and that helps the profession actually grow and helps patients at scale. So, getting the company to that level where that kind of impact is feasible is definitely one of my long-term goals.
What's impacting or influencing the accessibility aspect from the product side of things at the current moment?
Yes, so distribution is always a challenge. Finding the distribution channels, whether it's direct to the consumer online, whether it's partnering with doctors who can have the device available to patients, whether it's going internationally and understanding the different regulations and different international partners that you can collaborate with. And then also efficiencies in the manufacturing that can help you bring the price point down to where more patients are able to access it. These are all kind of things that I'm simultaneously trying to balance, understand how I can make progress on.
Well, I could imagine that you obviously get involved with a lot of industry events, going around the country, promoting the business, promoting the product. How have you found that experience to be, and how did the pandemic influence that trajectory that you already, or that momentum that you were on, where all events then had to be stopped? How did the pandemic influence the process where you had a good 2018, 2019, and everything has to come to a halt as a result of the pandemic? How did you sort of like navigate that journey in ensuring that you still get the product out there, you still get the name of the company out there, and you're still connecting with various eye care professionals and leaders and practices so that they can be able to know that there are products available that can better help them in managing their patients?
Absolutely. So not being able to connect with people in person was definitely a challenge. And so I think it forced me to think more creatively and helped me invest more in the digital presence for Augmented Vision Labs, whether it's working on the website, whether it's having a video made, whether it's creating different distribution channels that are direct to consumer through different platforms like Amazon. It really kind of forced me to kind of think outside the box, because you see that the traditional way to bring a product to market is to engage directly with practitioners, and that's something that I'm definitely working double time on to make up for lost time. But I was able to try to do as much as I possibly could, and I think it was a beneficial experience because it helped me grow probably further in those areas that I mentioned. And one thing that's been super helpful is actually having colleagues who are really supportive. There's a lot of different Facebook groups out there, one of them being the Scleral Lens Practitioners Group, where a lot of the specialty lens fitters share information and also share cases. And there'd be sometimes colleagues who would ask about different devices that are out there to help their patients. And I'm really fortunate to have supportive friends who have shared information about our company and what we've been doing for patients. Another really helpful thing was connecting with a colleague, Dr. Joseph Allen, also known as Dr. Eye Health. He is an amazing multimedia creative and the biggest YouTube channel that any optometrist has. So he's been really supportive to me as well, and has helped feature our devices in the videos that he has done, and also helped us create digital assets that have really helped us communicate what our company is all about and what our devices do. So I think it really takes a village with a lot of these aspects of things that you might think that you don't necessarily have the ability to say hire a team. But I think if you have a network of colleagues who are supportive, that you can get the same benefits as if you were a larger company, which is not something that I necessarily knew going into it. But looking back on it, I really understand that that's a lot of where the success of the company has come from.
Wow. So building those relationships, establishing those networks that are solid, that are commercially based, as well as authentically real, where you can be able to leverage off the network and the relationships that you had. That's very, very powerful. Is there pressure though, being a Black, not necessarily a Black entrepreneur, but a Black innovator within the eye care industry? Is there some form of pressure that, because I don't know a lot of Black people that are innovators when it comes to the technology space. There are not a lot of, I can't name 5 people from the top of my head anywhere in the world. So is there some level of pressure that you feel you have, in the sense that if you deliver and the company becomes a global phenomenon, it impacts so much of people that look like you and I? And if you fail, it also impacts a lot of how the industry then receives innovators that look like you and I.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did not necessarily see a lot of minorities in the technology space when I was starting out. But one thing that I did understand about optometry as a profession is that minorities have really contributed a lot to the profession, and that really that there is a big support system out there. So for me, that was the National Optometric Association. I had been affiliated with them since I was a first-year student, and going to the annual meetings, I saw a lot of Black pioneers who really contributed a great deal to optometry throughout the years, and also facilitated the opportunity for me to be able to have the experiences that I have now. So I really feel that, as the saying goes, I really do stand on the shoulders of giants, and really have felt that support throughout. And that's one of the things that really motivates me. So I'm not so much afraid, because I feel like the support that I have is sufficient for me to be successful. And so that really gives me a lot of confidence.
I love that. I love that. Speaking about that support, we did touch on it a bit earlier, but what would you then say were the non-negotiables for you on a personal level and on a professional level when you went about establishing your business, where you then decided that, you know what, no matter what, this is what I need to be able to get this product and this company running? What were your non-negotiables in terms of what you then decided you need in order to get going?
Absolutely. So, the main thing that I really had no intention of compromising is making sure that patients were at the forefront, and that whatever I developed was going to be, ultimately in the benefit and the service of patients and also doctors. So, I wanted to make sure that anything that I developed was either directly helping a patient or helping a doctor be able to help a patient. And that I would say is the main guiding principle for Augmented Vision Labs, and also for anything that we develop. Additionally to that, I would say, focusing on developing something that solves a real pain point for people, not something that's just a minor inconvenience, but something that is, truly something that reduces the quality of life for a patient, or really gets in the way of the delivery of patient care. I think that, having something that concrete is really helpful, because it can be really easy when you're developing things with technology to have a solution that's looking for a problem. You can understand how to do something that seems really interesting, really cool, but if there's not really a hardcore problem that you're solving, then you're developing a solution that no one really needs. So those two things are things that I try to stick to, and make sure that we're implementing them in all the different areas that we're exploring.
Wow. That's fantastic. Outside of the lens insertion system, are there any other products that you currently have already in the market, or that are in the development process? And that's the one part of the question. The other part of the question then will be, are you focusing mainly on the contact lens related innovation, or you looking at patient care as a whole in terms of what problems patients are focusing on, and if you have the capacity and the capabilities to solve that problem, you will then develop the technology that goes with it. What's your thinking process around that?
Absolutely. So I try not to put too many boundaries around the areas that the company can expand into. I think keeping an open mind is really helpful. So it's one of those things where I'm always trying to stay up to date with what technologies are actually becoming available to practitioners, what practitioners are finding to be pain points for them, and then also on the patient side, trying to understand, despite the solutions that we have for patients, are there problems that are still existing? So those are things that I try to keep on the back of my mind and try to keep my eyes and ears open for, because I think that's really important for guiding the future of the company. And as far as the current efforts, we do have a big focus in the contact lens insertion space, because I think it's really an area where there's a lot of unmet need. And in addition to that, we're also focusing on anterior segment imaging, where we're developing adapters that allow providers to connect their smartphones to their slit lamp to be able to image what they're seeing at the slit lamp, which enhances their patient education efforts, and then also helps with co-management and telemedicine efforts, and even going further, working with pharma companies who are interested in running clinical trials where they're using photographs as the endpoint for the actual studies. And so we're working on engaging providers and also companies that are in the clinical trial space as well for that.
Wow, wow, powerful, powerful. For that first year optometry student who is just passionate about eye care, and they listening to this and they're like, wow, I never knew that optometrists can actually go the technology route. I always thought or assumed that it was the big corporates that are associated with the technology route. What advice would you give them? What are some of the things that they need to be investing in right now in terms of their time, the resources that they need to be aware of whilst they're still studying, that will help them in the long run for whatever type of technology or entrepreneurial space that they will want to be finding themselves in?
Yes, I would say that investing in really building a solid foundation as a clinician is a really important thing, because anything that you develop is going to draw on your clinical experience and your experience working with patients. That's kind of the secret sauce that you kind of bring to the table when you're a clinician, is that you have that experience that can't be substituted. You can work with engineers who are really subject matter experts on, say, developing products, or people who are business people who have experience of running companies. You won't necessarily be able to match those skills, at least not in the beginning. It takes time to build those capabilities and that experience. But right off the bat, when you graduate from optometry school, you have a wealth of knowledge of the actual delivery of patient care, and also the ecosystem that the patient care is delivered within. So having a solid understanding of how to be a clinician and how the actual eye care system works helps you see where those pain points exist and where solutions can actually be beneficial. So I'd say that's the most important thing during your student years. And it's always great to keep your eyes and ears open to the technology space and understand what's actually happening. So for me, I really understood during my years as a student that technology overall was really growing at a much faster pace than the technology adoption within eye care was. So I really saw a technology gap that was building, and I felt that I had a responsibility to help address that, because a lot of the great developments that are happening in the overall technology space are things that patients can benefit from, things like augmented and virtual reality, things like artificial intelligence. We're not really at the point of integrating those to their full potential in eye care, but really the future of those is really bright. And you being someone who's just getting into the profession of optometry, you're going to have 30 or 40 years in eye care. So that whole time frame where those things can be applied to eye care are going to be the years when you're practicing and serving patients. So it's really great to spend some time to understand the technologies that will shape your career going forward. If you end up starting to actually want to develop something in the technology space, it has never been easier to actually enter the technology space as someone who is a clinician and also someone who doesn't necessarily have experience in entrepreneurship or product design or engineering. There's more content than ever before online, and the tools to actually get started are much more readily available than ever before.
Wow, that is so powerful. Would you say that a lot of technological advancements are for a limited group of people in terms of the patients, due to the high costs involved in the technology development. And in the early stages, accessibility, like you mentioned earlier on, becomes a big challenge. I look around and I see the people that get to enjoy, or the patients that get to enjoy the benefits of the technological advancements, tend to be from affluent areas and not necessarily the low incoming areas. And maybe my perception of it is based in here in South Africa or Africa as being my reference point. Do you find that to be the norm throughout different parts of the world? And if that is the case, how can we then go about changing that? What are some of the things that we can then do as we are introducing all these technological advancements in the industry? How do we reduce costs faster so that the people that will greatly benefit from the advancements with regards to technology don't have to wait much longer than they currently are?
I think it actually is important to have accessibility be a priority. And so for any company, you're faced with really so many different challenges to be able to actually just develop a product and bring it to market, and then actually have that product be something that's sustainable. So, in the midst of all those challenges, it's difficult to, bring that product to market and then also scale it to everyone who can benefit from it. So initially, companies work with essentially the patient base that is able to afford their services. And so that's unfortunately where things kind of plateau for some companies, is that they're not able to scale the solutions further. But it's something that I think technology can play a critical role in. So it just takes a matter of looking at whatever solution that you're considering and seeing where the different barriers are to expanding that. Whether it's physically having locations where patients can access the technology, whether it's pricing, whether it's patient education. There are a myriad of different problems out there that cause something to not be scaled to its full potential, but technology can play a role in a lot of those. One thing that I think we'll be talking about more in optometry going forward is the concept of automation. And essentially, we're going to be looking at having technology offload some of the work that humans are doing now. And that's not necessarily to the detriment of reducing jobs in eye care, but more so freeing humans to do more things that only humans can do. So I think in our effort to scale our services and the care that we deliver to more patients, that we should actually embrace automation and work with companies who are trying to bring different automation solutions to eye care to help them understand the ethical responsibility that they have and that we have as practitioners, to where they're developing the technology in a way that does not harm patients, it benefits patients and doctors, and helps us grow our impact in the community.
Wow, wow, wow. That is, I love that. I love that. How is your leadership perspective or approach evolved over time? When you look back at when you started this entrepreneurial journey to where you are right now, how has your character developed, and how has your leadership style or approach or perspective evolved over time?
I think the biggest thing is not oversimplifying things. I used to go from A to B just in my mind without understanding really what it took to accomplish something. The more that I've read and learned from people who have really excelled in the entrepreneurship space, I learned that growing a company is about growing relationships with people. Mentoring and scaling competence is really the biggest thing that you could do as a leader. And so that's something that I've invested in learning more about myself. And I also invested in keeping an eye out for what people are doing that is really innovative and how they're reaching the results that they are. So along with that is reading a lot of books, keeping up with people who are really innovative in technology as a whole. One of the people that I really look up to is Elon Musk, and how he has really innovated in multiple different industries using a guiding principle that he calls first principle thinking, which essentially boils down to starting with a blank slate and not necessarily looking to make modifications to existing solutions, but really starting from ground truths and then building logically from there. And so that's something that I've tried to apply to my own life and to Augmented Vision Labs. And has been a really helpful thing. So I think that having mentors, whether it's people that you get to engage with in person or people who you get to learn from afar, is a really important thing when you're a young person who doesn't have the experience but wants to build it.
Wow, wow, wow. I love how you answered that, in the sense that a lot of the times you always ask the question of, are there enough mentors in the eye care industry? And you just actually opened my own eyes that you as a person are in a position to go and get the mentors that you necessarily need, whether it be within your industry or outside of your industry, who can be able to accelerate your approach to whatever it is that you have a vision for. And you're not limited to only having mentors that you have access to, but you can actually get mentors that are far beyond your reach, but whom their work speaks for themselves, and that you can gravitate towards the work and the principles that they have lived and defined themselves for, that have enabled them to build the kind of businesses or products that they have established. So I love that approach from you. You are involved in different organizations as well. You seem to actually care. You seem to have a genuine care for giving back, for getting involved, for getting stuck in and not waiting for other people to make change, but you seem to get involved. Where did that love for getting involved come from? And when did it start, if I can put it that way?
I would say it really started from before I entered optometry. When I was a pre-optometry student, I saw how selfless optometrists were in being generous with their time and their mentorship, and how they were really excited about their profession and really wanted to share that. And being an optometry student, and after graduating, I learned that that wasn't an isolated incident. That's really what optometry as a profession does. It's a profession of service, a profession of giving back and paying it forward. And the people who have mentored me are people who were once mentored by by optometrists themselves. And so, they're giving back and instilling that spirit of giving back and service in the next generation of optometrists. So it was something that just kind of came naturally based on what I really saw in optometry. And it really is one of the most rewarding things to be able to see someone where you were a few years ago and be able to kind of share things that help make your experience easier.
Wow, wow, wow. I love that. I love that. What inspires you though? And what frustrates you? Yeah, let me actually, and the other part of it is, what frustrates you the most, and what inspires you? Yeah.
I'll start maybe with the frustrating part. I think, overall, the thing that when I get the most frustrated is when I feel that I'm not living up to my potential. Really, the opportunities that I've had are nothing short of extraordinary, especially thinking back to where my family originally came from, and the opportunities that I would have had if I had, lived a different life. I really feel a responsibility to make the most of the opportunities that I have now. So, if there are times that I feel that I'm not quite living up to that, then that's when I, feel that I'm most frustrated. As far as inspiration, really, I'm inspired by the opportunity to serve people. I think that it's a real privilege to be in a place where you can make a tangible impact on people's lives. And as eye care professionals, the solutions that we offer to patients are things that they benefit from every single day. Even if you're just prescribing a pair of glasses, that's something, a tool that helps that patient get through their day and be able to function, earn a living, and enjoy their family. So, there's really nothing minor about what we do. Everything we do is significant and impactful. So, that is really rewarding and inspiring to me.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I love that so much. Dr. Mahgoub, this has been an eye-opening masterclass series. Thank you for pouring your heart into the way you were answering the questions and enlightening us with your approach to entrepreneurship, to technology, to eye care as a whole. Where can people connect with you? What are the different online platforms that people can connect with, and as well as your websites that people can be able to connect with you?
Absolutely. I would love to connect with anyone who would like to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn as Fayiz Mahgoub, also on Instagram as Fayiz_M, And if you're interested in learning about what we do at Augmented Vision Labs, you can check us out at augmentedvisionlabs.com.
Wow, 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 wow. Everyone, that was another episode of the Vision Straight Masterclass series with an incredible leader, Dr. Fayiz Mahgoub. If you're not subscribed to the Vision Straight YouTube channel, make sure to do so right now. And also do connect with us on the different social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. We are here to just connect with one another, help one another to grow. These masterclass series have been an absolute blessing. Looking at how many people are connecting from different parts of the world has truly, truly been amazing. And so watch out for the space. There's more to come, more episodes to come, more leaders who are just as inspiring as Dr. Mahgoub are coming onto the platform so that we can elevate Eyecare to a whole nother level. So stay tuned, everyone. Until the next episode, take good care, everyone.